talking about the sustainability, just like to describe the meaning of sustainability by expressed by UN Brundtland Commission. It says development which meets the needs of present without compromising the ability of future generation to meet their own needs. This is very true. We know the three spheres of sustainability, which is economics, environmental and social. When they are in combination, these spheres, they make a further classification as environmental, economics, economic, social, and social environmental. The principles of sustainability are based on these three areas, which are environmental, economic, and social. And these three pillars are the sustainability model. This model, when we apply to the energy and water management. Today, the planners, researchers, engineers, developers, and regulators are working on the principle to achieve the sustainability goal in the field of energy and water management. What is not sustainable is world consumes around 340 billion kilowatt hour of electricity every day. This is not sustainable. By the year 2030, we'll be producing 4.2 billion tons of carbon dioxide per year. We'll run out of atmosphere faster than we will run out of fossil fuels. About the water, globally we consume around 4 trillion cubic meters of fresh water every year. Around 1.4 billion people already live in areas that are simply running out of water. These are the challenges which we are facing. But at the same time, there are opportunities as well in different areas where we can improve in the energy efficiency, in the energy conservation techniques, smart grids, renewables, storage devices, EV charging stations, ISO 50000 audits. In water also, we can do some improvements in water smart devices and applications, water SCADA, reducing the non-recoverable water by continuously monitoring the network. These are the opportunities. I now welcome the panelists on board. First, I would like to give a brief introduction of the participants. Dr. Rida Sabuni is the Managing Director in the MENA region for the Clean Energy Consultancy Energetics Incorporated. Mr. Sabuni led the establishment of Energetics Dubai office in late 2015. Prior to relocating to Dubai, he spent 7 years at the company headquarters in Washington, D.C. His professional areas of expertise include strategic energy management, ISO 50001, for industry and building and R&D program support, and global manufacturing innovation and energy efficiency policies. He has nearly 10 years experience consulting for the US Department of Energy and recently led a project to establish a national energy efficiency data framework for the Sultanate of Oman. I welcome him. We have Mr. Layali on board. Mr. Layali is internationally experienced executive with a career dedicated to the cutting edge of B2C and B2B customer engagement in the energy and water sectors. Spent a decade in Silicon Valley, worked across 5 continents, currently based in London, served on the board of directors of California Energy and Efficiency Industry Council, and now Chief Product Officer Advisor. Mr. Krishnamurthy is an energy and water sector professional with a sound experience of around 39 years, rendering his services in the field of installation, commissioning, maintenance, auditing consultant. He is presently working with environmental solutions and consultancy as Deputy Director involving activities related to energy audits, water projects, health, safety, environment audits, project implementation, etc. I welcome Mr. Krishnamurthy. And we have Dr. Fattah, is a faculty in the Department of Civil Engineering at the American University of Sharjah. His primary teaching and research activities are in the field of environmental engineering with special focus on sustainable and decentralized treatment options for water reservoir and water distribution. He is an AUS member of University of California, Davis Arab Region, Consortium on Water Energy Food Nexus Research Group, and actively involved with water-related studies with SIWA in Sharjah. He is currently the Deputy Editor of Journal of Environmental Engineering and Science journal that is published by ICE in UK. Welcome. So we start our discussion in the panel. And my first questions to all of you will be starting with your experience and and what you have faced in your projects and the challenges which you see in the energy and water management. So I start with Mr. Rida.
Okay, first of all, thank you so much for having us and for the moderation. So I think, the challenges are vast. I think we have a good diversity of experience. I'll focus a little bit on the industrial sector in my discussion, and I'll just mention that it's a mixture of technology and behavior, right? Those are the two things you always need to keep in mind. So when working in the industrial sector, for example, there are technologies that you can install that can have very good rates of return, but you have to remember that with training and with behavioral changes, you could make just as much impact with perhaps even less upfront investment costs. So that's why you have things like energy management systems, which can structure your approach to energy management and can give you great energy savings and great water savings as well. So I'll go into the details a little bit further, but I'll just maybe start off with that general approach, which is technology and then behavior, and making sure you address both. And then you have R&D as well, which was touched upon earlier by Professor Nidar.
Okay. So Lyle, please.
Good morning. Thank you for having us. Thank you, Dr. Aleem, for hosting this panel. Adviso is a data science and behavior science company. We have digital platforms to engage customers. So our focus is very specifically on behavior. And one level deeper of behavior, not just how individuals interact with building management systems or different types of energy or water management technologies, but the actual behavior of human beings. So looking at psychology principles, looking at behavior science principles to understand better how humans make decisions, how they interact with energy and water, how they live their energy and water consumption experience, and helping influence those customers to make better decisions, to be more efficient in energy and water. So our focus is really on how do we use data to understand how people consume energy and water, and then how do we influence them with behavior science principles to make better decisions.
Thank you. Mr. Krishnamurthy.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Dr. Aleem and Aleem Congress for giving us this opportunity to present some of my views on energy and water challenges and opportunities. To give you an idea about the challenges what we face, I would like to briefly tell what I do or our organization does as far as the energy and water conservation or energy and water projects are concerned. Actually, we are a company which is more devoted for both these areas for bringing about a systematic, instrumented process, technology and data-driven approach for energy and water reduction and conservation. So one of the, if you say about the challenges what we face is the basic awareness itself, as Dr. Aleem was mentioning in his opening remarks. Many of the statistics and many of the challenges what we face today in water and energy is not even having awareness among the even major industrial sector and commercial sector entrepreneurs and executives. And also another challenge what I'm facing when we take up such projects with industrial and commercial sector is the funding they have to implement the solutions, even if they're interested on that one. Another factor which I would be touching, of course, at the end of my remarks would be about the regulations that we need in this part of the world to go about with the energy and water conservation studies. And as of now, I will stop with this one.
Thank you. Dr. Kazi, please.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for having us here. It's difficult to actually talk after all these three well-known people have already talked, and they talked about behavior, they talked about people, the public perception. I'm in the university, and I have to go through the very basic end users, and these are university students. Yes, they're lower grade school students, but what I face is that trying to convince the students, and these are, remember, university students, they're supposed to be well known, well educated, and trying to convince them that sustainability is an issue, especially when I talk about water, because I teach environmental engineering. And when I talk about sustainability and the need for water conservation and water reuse, this is something that people don't necessarily get. And I always tell them, we here in UAE are spoiled. We are spoiled, why? Because CUA, you see, you open the tap and the water flows. It's very, very clean water. There is no shortage of water. So when I talk to my students and I talk to my colleagues, and this is not only students, and I'm sure it's the same in our sister university, University of Sharjah, is when you talk to these faculties, they don't get that this is something that we need to do, right? Sustainability is a big issue. Yes, the technology is there, but if you do not reduce the amount of water that you consume or the energy that you consume, it's not going to work. It's not a sustainable thing. So going back into the core of the studies, and we talked about this early in the morning, is that we need to do something where we impart these sustainability issues in the curriculum. And that has to come from higher up. So it's the education board who has to force all the universities and the schools to say, you know what, you need to teach them about sustainable issues, and whether it's water or energy, or even in general, food. I'm in part, like I said, and we have a 6 university consortium where we look into the relationship between water, energy, and food. And I think, Dr. Mirdal, you mentioned that these things are interrelated. You cannot go without one. If you reduce the amount of water, there is no food. And if you don't have food, then you don't have public. And how do these interact with each other? And that's a huge challenge that we have. I'll talk about other challenges that we also have in the university, but I'll let you start off the questions from now.
Thank you. Dr. Kazi, I will ask you the question about the opportunities globally and regionally in the water energy management from the present and future requirements. You can give your viewpoints.
Well, thank you. Well, that's a challenging question. Let's talk about just the university. I'll just talk about my university in particular, which is the American University of Sharjah. Now, they have a sustainability office, and I'm sure all universities nowadays have it, but how do they go forward and do what they want to do? I'll give an example of the first one that we have. We are building a new engineering and science building, and they have received the 2 Pearl for the design, which I think is a huge thing, and we were very proud of it. That's going on, and hopefully we will get at least 2 Pearl once the building it's done. So that's an initiative, I think, that comes from His Highness as well, because he's in our board, he's the president of our university, the chancellor, and everyone lower down in the hierarchy where they feel this is something that we need to do. It's a responsibility, I think, that we end users have. We were really pleased to have Dr. Alim last week and talking to us, and the students were encouraged, and we need people like this where they go in and talk and motivate the students that this is something that is absolutely necessary, and this is something, it's not about money. Now I'm really happy, and I make fun of this in class, where I've been campaigning for reduction in the bottled water use, which unfortunately hasn't been happening. And if you see how many bottles are being used every single day in universities, it's crazy. So now with the tax coming in, now the students have to pay in the vending machine a dirham and 5 fills, I guess. But no one has 5 fills. No one has 20 fills. They don't even have 50 fills. So basically they end up paying 2 dirhams for 1 bottle. And I laugh at them. I'm saying, university now provides free water if you only brought your own water bottle. But again, the shift, the mentality, the culture is still not there. And this is something I think has to be built into the students, and this is what we're lacking. AUS has tried its best to be more sustainable. We have sensors in the lighting in our offices. So if you're not there, the light goes off. We have sensors on the water faucets. But these come at a cost. And how do you, as a university which is self-sufficient, how do you try and motivate people that this is a cost that you are going to incur and you have to pay for it? Recently, we were giving our university's water consumption. We live on campus. So us and University of Sharjah, we live on campus, very beautiful campus. And like Dr. Nadine said, if you go there, it's all green. You will not realize this is in the middle of a desert. So how do we convince people that this is also needed, right? That's a challenge. On the university side, we are trying to do research as much as possible, but at the end of the day, funding is a big issue. We are a small university, we are a recent university, but it's a liberal university. It's very different from Sharjah University, which is more technical in nature. We do have much more liberal studies that we need to give them. But where does the funding come in? I might have an idea that I want to do, but is the corporate there, or is the funding source there to let us work on it? We have to fund our students. And funding students is very expensive, you know that. And the culture of research is still not here. I have talked to a lot of people where they say, you know what, let some other university worldwide do the research and we'll bring the product and implement it here. Unfortunately, I have tried to convince them, these is local conditions and not always does it work. We used to have LEED, which is the green design from the US, but now we have Estidama because now we have the social part and the culture part that we have to impart on it. Same thing I would say, using something, bringing a model from outside in the US is not going to work here. And I think this is the corporate social responsibility, and I'm happy to see a lot of these industries are now coming back to the university and saying, we'll help you. We do see that, and it's been recent times, and I think the whole culture is changing, and which is really pleasant to see, at least from my perspective.
So still a lot to do.
Still a lot to do, and I'm very, very happy to see there is a degree that is coming up in water, environment, and desalination, and I'm pleased to see, Dr. Alim, you are helping them. I have campaigned for this in our university. But then again, each university has their own direction that they want to go, and I'm happy that this is the direction they have gone, and it's really pleasant.
So Krishnamurthy, your viewpoint about the opportunities in the energy and water.
Yeah, actually the opportunities when we talk about it, actually the very direction from the UN itself, out of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, if you see, at least 5 of them are directly or indirectly related to energy efficiency. So that shows the importance of the energy and of course the associated water, as Professor Nidal was telling. They are interdependent now, especially where countries like UAE or the Gulf countries, where we rather produce water by desalination process, where there is a lack of natural resources. And when we take this interdependency between them, then we need to think about a comprehensive solution of conserving both. And thank God, there are a lot of technological development that has happened in this area in many parts of the world. So that technology is available now, and it is the responsibility of the people to harness it in the right way. That is where the challenge lies, actually. And also, I'm seeing, I was telling about the funding process. Even if some industries and commercial sector people are willing to implement the ways and means to conserve water and energy, they face the challenge of funding. Like now the professor was telling, even for implementing the sensors, it could be a simple thing, but it involves money, actually. So for funding, there is a challenge, but the opportunities are also there. Now we see a lot of green sukuk bonds that are in the market. which are ready to fund green projects. So that is one of the opportunities I can see. The prices of the renewable energy production has come down a lot, especially in the past 5 years. We see a very big downward trend, wherein we can encash that possibility to bring in the renewable energy, especially in this part of the world. Already we are going ahead, especially the UAE is marching forward, but still there is a lot of opportunity. But one word of caution in this is that whatever that works in other parts of the world need not work here. So people should go to these opportunities with caution in the mind that how to customize it to this part of the world. Coming to the water, one is the interdependency between the water and the energy should be de-linked. One of the solutions is, of course, the production of electricity through nuclear power, which is also taking its first stride in this part of the world now. And another thing is that the recycling of water and the mental, the readiness for the people, again awareness to use the recycled water like how they use in Singapore and other places. So this is another opportunity which I am seeing. So I would like to also compliment Professor's words, like in the school itself, we need to catch them young, the next generation, and bring about this awareness of conservation of water and energy, which would be a big opportunity when they grow up in the later stages. Thank you.
So Layali, your view about the opportunities in this region and globally?
Yeah, I think so. From our point of view, there are tremendous amounts of opportunities, particularly because the behavioral aspect of energy and water management is often overlooked. And the big challenge, so it's a two-sided coin of an opportunity and a challenge. The big challenge is that we have actually lost the battle already when we are thinking about what are the strategies we can take to save energy and save water. When Adviso is thinking about behavior science, we're thinking about the science of how humans make decisions. And the way that we make decisions is we have hundreds of biases, hundreds of little mental reflexes, mental shortcuts to make our decisions, to look at complex problems, and to identify strategies. There's one in particular that's called the false consensus bias, which is one that all of us, I think, especially in the energy and water sectors, suffer from. The false consensus bias says that whatever we think is normal, we assume most people also think it is normal. There was a study that was done at Stanford, kind of the reference study on this topic, where a professor had some students and said, okay, you students, you take a sandwich board, those little advertisement boards you can put on your shoulders, and go around campus advertising Joe's sandwiches. And about half of the students said, no, I don't really want to do that, I'm not interested in doing that. And the other half of the students said, oh yeah, no problem, I'll do that, that's fine, I don't mind. And so the students who said, I don't want to do it, they asked them, would other people do it? And they said, no, of course, nobody would do this. Who would want to walk around campus advertising Joe sandwiches? And the students who said, sure, I'll do it, they said, yeah, most people would want to do it. So whatever we think is normal, we think everybody else is normal. So if you imagine how many times you've had a conversation thinking, well, when I receive my energy bill, I would want to know ABC, or if I go onto a website about water conservation, I would want to see information about XYZ. That may be true for you or for me, but most likely it is not true for the rest of the population. So one of the things that Adviso tries to focus on is to understand what are these mental shortcuts that we take and how does the human brain actually function so that our energy and water conservation strategies will actually work with most of the population. That we are not saying, well, I'm an energy geek, and so I love seeing meter data, I love seeing load curves, I love, minute level interval data, but that's just Sean. If I show graphs of consumption data to most of the population, their eyes will go blank after 2 minutes and nobody cares. So this is how we try to challenge ourselves, and we believe that most of the industry, particularly on the residential side, have not yet been able to really question all of the traditional energy conservation and water conservation strategies from a human behavior point of view.
Okay, so how do you see the behavioral concept and how we can change the consumer habit
So
with respect to challenges and opportunities?
yeah, so there's one, to give another example of a behavior science bias, there's another principle called the licensing effect. And the licensing effect says that humans very naturally, and actually thinking about what my colleagues mentioned of strategies that work in other parts of the world, but finding strategies that work in the UAE, this is the beauty of behavior science, is that humans, generally speaking, are wired in very similar ways. So if you take a person from Poland, a person from Japan, and a person from Kenya, their cultures will be very different, but the hard wiring inside their brains is very similar. So when you get to this deeper level of behavior science, things that will change human behaviors in China will change them in where I'm from, in France, will change them in Spain, in Brazil, etc. So to give a specific example of the licensing effect, I'm sure all of you have felt this before. The licensing effect says that when you do something towards an objective, towards a goal, towards a positive moral, you very naturally give yourself permission to do things that maybe are not so good, maybe do not go towards that moral. So a basic example is if you go to the gym in the morning, maybe in the afternoon you have a few more cookies. Maybe you get a second piece of cake, and you kind of give yourself, there's this balance that happens constantly with human behavior where you do one thing good and maybe you give permission to do something else that might go against that original goal. So there was a fascinating study in 2013 in Switzerland where they took 50 apartments and they put them on a behavioral program to say, save energy, save energy, save energy. Then they took 50 other apartments and they put them on a behavioral program, say, save water, save water, save water. The 50 apartments that were influenced to save energy, the water consumption went up. The 50 apartments where they said, save water, the energy consumption went up. So how do you manage this effect where you're trying to do both? You're trying to influence customers to save energy and water. And they have this dynamic. So this is where we use another principle that works across cultures, which is called social norm. A lot of you have probably seen this. Many companies have applied it, including energy companies, which is often known as the neighbor comparison. So you identify similar homes and then you compare them to each other and help them get closer to efficient homes. This relies on another behavioral principle, which is a social norm. So another characteristic of humans across cultures is that we are social beings. So we are constantly forming and coming in and going out of groups. The instant that all of us came into this room this morning, we all became a group. We didn't have to talk to each other. We didn't have to agree that we were a group. It just happened. Automatically we became a group, and there were norms that were established immediately when we came in this group together. So for example, if I walked off the stage and I started to do my remarks standing on the table, that would be strange. We would all know that that's strange, and we would all know that that's not part of the norms of this group. So there's a very natural human impulse to conform to these norms. So when you think about the licensing effect of energy and water, you can use something like social norm to counter that effect and influence customers to save both energy and water.
Thank you. So Rida, as you have been working for a long time in US, how do you see, what is your expert opinion about this region with respect to the challenges, opportunities, energy and water sector?
Sure, sure. So, I mean, I think
And
this
where do
region.
you see the improvements are coming up?
Yeah. So I think I'll start in terms of, you know, challenges. For many years, the greatest challenge was actually the tariffs, right? The electricity and water tariffs in this region historically have been very low, right? So you go back 6 years ago or so, and tariffs for energy in this region are typically 25% of government expenditures. 25% of what the government is spending is just to subsidize energy, right? So this is something now that has been changing. Over the last 2-3 years, even the last year, you've seen now subsidies starting to be eliminated across the region. Different countries are working at different paces, but that's generally now that the prices have gone up, right? So that's an excellent first move. Now, how do you take advantage of those prices? That's really the second question that comes to mind. You now have people that are aware now that, okay, we cannot really waste as much energy and water as maybe we used to, because actually there is a cost to that. But there is more that you can do, and I'll touch on some of the things that you were talking about, because I'm coming from the same perspective. For this region, electricity, over half of electricity consumption is in residential homes. Right, so that's a major target, major opportunity for savings. And you have, for example, studies in the United States that we were involved with energetics, with the US Department of Energy, where they did behavioral studies working with utilities to try to impact energy consumption in the residential space. And they did things like real-time signals to consumers that, this particular day, this is a peak day, and the energy consumption in these hours is going to go up by 2 times or 3 times. And they were able to for example, rather than invest into a new peaker plant, for example, the state of Oklahoma utility in Oklahoma, they were able to use this behavioral approach to basically aggregate savings across the residential sector, all these residential consumers, using this simple approach of signals, providing them price signals, time of use, which basically helps them to save energy and ultimately saves the utility the cost of building a new peaker plant, and ultimately saves environment. So that's one approach. It's been very popular now in the United States. Companies like O-Power have gotten a lot of success working with utilities, using this behavioral approach of, rather than just telling you you're going to save energy, rather comparing you to your neighbors. That was the most effective approach, is to say to a person, your neighbor is actually doing better than you. They are actually saving more energy than you. You can do better. And just with that simple behavioral approach, they're able to generate, savings, 3%, 5%, up to 10% in some cases. So a lot of nice ways to kind of tackle this problem, which now can be considered in this region, I think, and customized, as we were talking about. No copy-paste, but rather customized.
And from your vast experience in the field of energy management, how do you see the R&D and improvement in the energy and water sector to meet the future challenges?
Yeah. So I think this region really needs to play a role in R&D. There are specific challenges that this region faces, which we can now take a lead in the future and in the world globally. So I absolutely agree with what you're saying. We should not just simply, import technologies into this region and rely on others to do the hard work of R&D. So in particular this region, I would say R&D in desalination is critical, absolutely critical. So we talked about the reverse osmosis. Professor Nidal gave a really nice introduction on the topic. And reverse osmosis is great right now, but we need to do better. And there are things happening now across the world. So what I've been involved with, for example, is working with the US Department of Energy, and there's a lot of funding, for example, being done on advanced approaches to membranes. So things like atomically precise manufacturing, atomically precise materials. So this type of approach, it's still in early stages, it's still basic science, but the idea is you could design membranes to specifically allow things to go through and other things not to go through. And that is something that will be the next generation of desalination, right? And the key thing here is this kind of basic science is not just universities being funded, but universities being funded to work with industry. And that's something that I think is really important and which will help to catalyze an industry, an ecosystem in this region that is based on R&D. So industrial, working with universities to solve problems with funding from the government. And so I would like to see more government programs focused on R&D, whether it's from the national government, the UAE Ministry of Energy or the UAE Ministry of Education, from utilities, the SIWA, DIWA, ADWIAs of the world. We need to all be working together to build this ecosystem for specific challenges for our region.
Dr. Qazi, you are more in the mind reading and the teaching business. So how do you see the behavioral science works in the various cultures? And my second question to you is, what are the initiatives that AUS is currently taking towards the development and university vision for the future in light of challenges and opportunities in the energy and water management?
Thank you. I was really fascinated at what you were saying at the behavior science, and as engineers we don't always look very favorably in the social science, but they're all interrelated, right? And I'm going to have to talk to you more about that and how we can use this behavior science in our students. So that's a very, very interesting thing. Regarding AUS, as I was mentioning, the things that we have been trying to do and what we will want to do, we have a sustainability office, as I mentioned, and one of the things that we are looking into right now is in-house decentralized treatment opportunities, whether it's through RO of reusing our gray water, and that's a research I think that we want to do very, very in recent times. There's also the option of using MBRs and RO to treat our own wastewater, because now as you see, we generate our wastewater, they're taken in trucks, goes to the wastewater treatment plant to be treated, so that's a lot of energy being lost. It gets treated and then gets sent back to the university city again for reuse, and that's another energy. And we are trying as best as possible to decentralize this treatment. Now, we can obviously not do in day one, but at least the thinking is there, and the want to do that is there. Now, is it going to be possible? Again, the funding is a main issue, and I think this is changing slowly. We have done research with SIWA on the distribution system, on leakage, and trying to find the quality in there. But then we have SIWA, and then we have the Sharjah municipality. I will talk about Sharjah because most of my work is with Sharjah. And Sharjah municipality is in charge of the wastewater. So those are two entities that work on the same basic thing, which is water, but on a two different levels. And how do we bring those two together? That's one. But the other challenge is that from the behavioral science, not only are we trying to provide the data to the people, the end users, but if you look on the campus, you'll see posters going up every year, and we send out emails. The sustainability office sends out emails saying this, for this month, this is what sustainability we want to do. So maybe 1 week or 1 month they'll say, save water. And then they'll put a note as to how much water is being consumed per person per day, and try and put that information out there as much as possible. And I think that's a big point, is that it's not only through the courses that we can give them information. You have to realize nowadays, and I tell my students, the first thing you do when you wake up is look at Facebook. That's the first thing. Then you go to the washroom and use the water. But those information that is being sent continuously, and I think the technology has to come in where we inform the public that this is what's happening. The only time that public will want to do something sustainable is when it hits their pocket, when the tariffs, like you said, it's really subsidized. And if it's subsidized, there's no will to do something. I have seen, and I talked about this, 2 dirhams for a bottle of water. My students have said, you know what, I stopped buying the bottle of water because it doesn't make sense that it's a 1 dirham, but I'm paying 2 dirhams. So they have stopped. Right? So the tariff has to be there where you force the people to do it. I remember SIWA has metering programs nowadays, digital metering programs, which is really, really good. And when I heard why it started is because people were complaining that their water consumption was so much. I didn't use so much water. And the same thing happened on campus as well. And when we saw our water bill and electricity bill, people freaked out. I was not here over the summer, so why is my electricity bill so high? That's because your AC was running 80% of the time. So it's got nothing to do with the lights that you turned off during summer, but it's something else. But those are the things that, and numbers make sense. When I asked my students as to how much water do you consume, these are let's say third year students, they'll say maybe 60 liters of water, 30 liters. And if someone says 100 liters of water, people would laugh. The whole class would laugh like, come on, 100 liters. But when I tell them what the real, whether you're using 250 to 300 liters of water, that hits them, you know. And that's a challenge that we need to do time and time again. And we feel we are responsible as faculties and teachers for these students who are going to go up into the real world facing those problems. I really like the fact that there are some companies, like you mentioned, where the R&D and the industry has to work close with one another, and that is a must. We are not asking as a university faculty, give us the money and we'll solve the problem. It doesn't happen that way. The industry are the ones who know what's going on. You are doing the behavioral science and you know what they want. As faculties, we can only tell them that this is the literature, this is the basics of the whole thing. But working with the industry, I think it's a big thing, and I'd really love to interact with all you wonderful people and trying to help us. And I'm never biased in saying only help a US. We have our sister university who does a lot of work on these things. So we can all collaborate together and work towards that goal. So there is a big future ahead. I have been here only 7 years, but I have seen the change in the public mindset. It wasn't there 7 years ago when I came from Canada. Canada is a total different world, right? You have sustainability, it's inbuilt, from the very school students, it's inbuilt. If you go here and talk to the students in class 10, what's sustainability? Why do we even need that? So that cultural change is changing, so which is it's a big plus, as well as the research funding. We now see more emails coming to us that, you know what, there's this company who wants to do research. I didn't see that 7 years ago, and it was never there, right? So I thank all the industries here and CEWA for this opportunity that we are getting.
So you see the change and the trend is positive.
Oh, for sure, I do see the change. It's not as fast as we would want to, obviously. Sometimes the industry might think, you faculties, you don't want money, just want the money. But remember, you are getting a product as well. You're testing the product. You could bring in a product from the States or Europe, but if you can get it to us, remember, university students are cheap. These are very, very cheap labor that you have, right? If you want to hire someone to do the research in your industry, you're going to pay 3-4 times more. But then if you give it to us, we have it. We are doing the same work that you want to do, but on a cheaper side. And as well as the students get the hands-on experience and talking to the industries. We are now doing something called a tiny house as part of our senior design, where we are building modular. So the students have to design a modular building, very, very small size. It's a 6 by 3 meter container. But they have to put in the structural component, they have to do the construction management, the sustainability, what we can put in there, and look at the cost. So that's something that I think in future it's going to help. It's go smaller, and instead of building these huge villas and spending so much money on water and energy, go smaller, because as people, we don't need such large facilities, right?
So Krishnamurthy, what are the challenges in your opinion in this part of the world, and how do you see your initiatives, the solutions and projects can help to overcome the challenges in the water energy sector in UAE and globally?
Thank you. Before I answer that, I assure that our organization would be definitely willing to take part with your programs in a very healthy and cooperative manner. Yeah, coming to the challenges, as I already told, that one of the major reasons for the people or the industrial and the commercial sector, which is consuming a lot of power and water, are not attaching more importance to this energy saving or water saving initiatives. It always takes the back seat whenever we approach them, is because of the lack of regulations. Yeah. If you see countries like India, if there is any industry which is consuming more than 30,000 million tons of oil equivalent, then they have to necessarily go an energy audit, a comprehensive energy audit study, and implement solutions and demonstrate to the government that they have implemented these solutions to considerably reduce the water and electricity consumption. Also they are supposed to do it once in 3 years as a follow-up audits and demonstrate that there is a continual effort demonstrated by the organization to reduce the energy and water. Whereas in this part of the world still we have to look for such regulations, because most of the times it's done on a voluntary basis or as a cost-saving initiative with the data and technology-driven solutions should be implemented.
So Larry, everyone is talking about smart homes, predictive science and machine learning. Where do you see the behavioral science here?
So I think in the topic of smart homes, so the first thing I would say is that it's definitely the future of where things are going from Adviso's point of view. So being able to have connected devices in the home, being able to see or understand consumers' consumption behavior better is useful. It's worthwhile, and the more these devices become intelligent. Some of you might be familiar with the Google Nest thermostat. Devices like this that have machine learning, that observe and understand your behaviors when you come in and out of the house, the temperatures that you usually use, at what times of day. Those devices start to learn by themselves and start to adapt so that you actually don't have to think about energy. You don't have to decide what temperature is best or what to do when you go on vacation. All these sorts of things, the machine does it for you. So we are very excited. We are not hardware people. We don't work in the actual smart home devices. So we are very excited to watch that industry grow and see what they do. Our hope is, and our mission as a company is to make sure that the human behavior aspects are built in and still taken into account in those devices. So there are a lot of devices today that are basically displaying data. So they look very nice, they're very pretty devices, and the data that they display is very sophisticated, the analytics behind it are very sophisticated, and the information is very interesting, but usually it's very interesting, once again, to people like us. People that already understand that sustainability is important, people who have background in the energy or water sectors, and who are able to put this information into context, who understand that in somewhere like the UAE, 75% or more of your electric consumption is going to be from cooling. To us, that might sound absolutely obvious, but many people don't. Just because they don't think about it, they don't understand the relationship between their behavior and the numbers that come out on their bill. So when it comes to smart home, smart thermostat, I think it's fantastic what's happening in that sector. We hope that it will continue to explode, that there will be more machine learning, more artificial intelligence into these devices, and our challenge for Adviso as a company is to make sure that the human behavior aspects of it are built into those devices, which is not yet the case for a lot of them.
So is there any roadmap you see towards the behavioral transformation?
Yeah, so there's one use case that we're working on, and we believe it's going to go more and more in this direction. So some of you might have heard of devices like Alexa from Amazon and Google Home. So these are little pods that sit in your home that you can actually speak to, and kind of like Siri on the iPhone, they have this artificial intelligence, and you can ask certain things. For Amazon, you can say, Amazon, order me another box of laundry detergent, things like that. So the way that these manufacturers have set up these little devices is almost like the App Store, where there is open source code where anybody can develop, if I use Alexa as an example, what they call a skill. So Alexa, this Amazon artificial intelligence pod, has different skills that can be programmed. So either to order your laundry detergent or to get the next season of Game of Thrones or whatever the case might be. And one of the use cases we're working on is to building skills into these devices that relate to energy and water. So if you imagine you come home one day and you have your bill either in your email or in Europe, we still get a lot of paper bills, and you see that your electric bill is much higher than what you expected, well, you can turn around and say, hey Alexa, why is my energy bill so high this month? And Alexa will tell you, well, your bill is high because you're consuming 30% more than average households similar to you, and here are your top 3 tips to try to lower your bill next month. And to have that intelligence built into Alexa so that customers don't have to, go into a separate website, see a whole list of energy efficiency recommendations, decide which ones to do, decide when to do it, decide which one is best. All this thinking that, once again, we take for granted because we understand these issues, we know what is effective behavior to save energy and water. Most people don't understand those things, don't have the time, don't care to understand, and they shouldn't have to. We shouldn't force them to become energy engineers. The rest of the population has their own profession, they have their own expertise, they have their own priorities. I think it's up to us in the industry, up to the smart device industry, up to the behavior scientists, to basically do the work for people and make their life easier while being sustainable.
Thank you. So Ridha, what are the advantages of adopting structured energy management system using the ISO 50001 framework, which includes a large behavioral element and in light with Sharjah's large industrial base?
Yeah, so Sharjah is really important in the UAE for industrial output, right? Over half of the country's output is coming from Sharjah. So looking at energy consumption reduction, trying to make improvements in the industrial sector, ISO 50001 is one approach that's really being adopted and accepted as a global best practice. So I'm curious in this room, who actually has heard of ISO 50001? Okay, 1, 2, okay, a couple. Who has heard of ISO 9001 or 14001, the quality? So more, okay. So very good. So basically ISO 50001 is an energy management system standard. So if you are a large user of energy, so a lot of industry, they use a lot of energy, a lot of electricity, fuels, and you are trying to reduce energy consumption, ISO 50001 basically provides you a roadmap. It tells you, okay, these are the things that you could do, these are the best practices that you should engage with, and this will help you to actually save energy. And this is something that we find across the world has verified savings coming from this practice. So what does it actually contain? It has things like you need to have a cross-functional energy team that meets on a regular basis. You need to have buy-in from your senior management. You need to set targets and goals. You need to have action plans to set those things in place. So it's really basic things, simple things, not really rocket science, but it helps to put a structured process in place at your organization which ensures that you have energy on your mind. Just like you have quality on your mind, safety on your mind, you now have energy on your mind, and it's something that you're going to save energy on a regular basis. So we're right now, for example, working with a company in Oman because they saw an energy shock, electricity prices went up for them. They said, how do we save energy? Well, they then looked into ISO 50001, and we are assisting them to actually implement ISO 50001 at their facility. So it's going very well, and I think there's a lot of room for growth within the UAE, which actually leads in the region. There's over 50 ISO 50001 standards in the UAE, which is very good for this region, but more can be done. And I think more incentives can be put in place to encourage facilities to adopt this kind of a standard. So for example, in Europe, they have tax incentives. So there's actually a financial benefit for companies to adopt ISO 50001 or to do energy audits, for example. You actually save money from the government. And so things like that can be put in place in the UAE to encourage further adoption.
Thank you. I'd like to wrap up the session. So just one message from all of you is what is the need of our towards the sustainability and shaping the future, especially in the utility perspective? You can just give your short, you can say, message to all.
Sure. I think my quick message is, the Arab world, the Muslim world has been leaders in science for many, centuries, and there's no reason why we cannot return to those days, right? So we need to be leading the way in the issues that matter most to us. So desalination, air conditioning, we're a hot region, right? These are topics that we can really take the lead in terms of scientific research, adoption of best practices, and there is a huge incentive for us to do that because remember, the overarching concern is this climate change, is this global warming that's taking place, and just look at the studies that really look into what's happening in 50 years or 100 years, what's going to happen to this region potentially if we do not get this problem under control. So we need to be taking the leadership role and set ambitious targets and then try to meet those targets.
That's true.
I think the key takeaway from Adviso's point of view is don't forget about the user. So, when we are trying to identify new systems, new technologies, new engineering methods, engineering is very precise. It's very clean, it's very structured, it's very rational. Humans are none of those things. Humans are irrational, they're emotional, they don't make logical decisions all the time. And so in all of your considerations, whether you're thinking about energy and water conservation programs, whether you're thinking of new systems, new technologies, or even developing new systems and technologies yourselves, our main message from Adviso is to remember the user and remember all these quirks and all these funny little characteristics that all of us have as humans and question what you're doing. Question the user interface, question the customer journey that you thought of. Is that a customer journey that's logical for you, or is it a customer journey that's actually logical for most people? So just remember the user and challenge yourself to really do that as actively as possible.
Thank you. So, Krishna, quick message from you.
Yeah, one message to take home means here electricity and water are taken for granted. These resources are not really, their preciousness is not felt. So there could be two kinds of hard actions or the steps. One is the regulations, like what I said, that compulsorily people have to do an energy study and bring down the conservation. This is mainly for the industrial and commercial sectors who are large consumers of power and water. And an increase in tariff to the extent that people feel that they should have control over the usage. And last but not the least, the soft actions of bringing the campaigns and trying to change the behavior of the people, like what he said now, the behavioral change. Because whatever we say, there is a saying that we cannot stop, for example, it's a proverb in our language, we cannot stop robbery unless the robber himself feels that he shouldn't do it, whatever be the other regulations and controls. So that way the people should feel themselves that they should go in for this one. That kind of behavioral changes is to be brought. Thank you.
So, Kazi, your quick message.
Well, being in the academia, the first thing I would say is to seek knowledge. A lot of us might be an expert in water or energy or both or sustainability, but don't keep it to yourself. It's to whoever knows, whatever you knows, you have to go out and tell the people. It's just, seeking knowledge is not that's it. It might be good for you, but unless you tell the people, your job is not done. And that's what I feel. I studied, we did all our courses, but now why am I in this field? Because I want to pass it along, and passing it on to the next generation, whether it's kids or students. So going out, talking, one of the reasons I came here is to seek out knowledge of what's happening. And based on that, I can change my behavior, right? I can easily see how best I can teach. So Dr. Aleem went last week. He didn't need to go to AUS to talk. But he went there, and I'm sure one of the reasons you went there is to pass on this knowledge that you have and try and motivate people. And that's, as an academician, I think this is what we love to do, is trying to motivate our students to do the right thing. It's difficult, obviously, not everyone is going to be convinced, but I tell my students is if I can change one person, one student per semester, my job is done. And if all our faculties do that, 350 faculties, that's 350 students that we have changed the behavior. So we have to go there and show people, that talk to people, talk to the students. And it's not only students. You can talk to your faculties, you can talk to your colleagues in there. And so pass on this knowledge that you have taken or you received.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Please join His Excellency. Mr. Rida Sabuni. Mr. Seen Lerl. Mr. Krishnamurthy. Dr. Qazi Parvez Fateh. Thank you.